And welcome to our LinkedIn Live on Thinking Beyond Workplace Reentry with Comfy. And I'm delighted to be joined today by Erica Eaton, the Chief Strategy and Operations at Comfy. Welcome, Erica.
Hi, Kevin. So great to be with you today.
You know, in the past couple of months, as this whole crisis has unveiled itself, and now we've all started talking about, oh, we're going to return to work. When I was chatting with you and the team in the last couple of weeks in the lead up to this week, I kind of jumped straight into, oh, it's return to work. And yourself and the team said, no, it's not. You've been working from home for months. Now it's all about returning to your place of work.
Yeah.
So at Comfy, how are you approaching all this?
Yeah, I think it's a really important distinction to be making. And so, you know, at Comfy, as a workplace platform, we really strive to sort of do two things, which is always connect employees with the spaces, people, and resources they need, and also help real estate managers navigate a very fluid workplace. And so I think what we've learned, if anything, you know, within the last couple of months is that the notion of the workplace is very important, but the actual work that people have been doing, you know, while maybe had some hiccups, has really not stopped. So we think it's really important to our employee base to know and acknowledge the level of work that's being done, but really the strategies that our clients are implementing is really about the healthy and safe return to the actual workplace and how they can best manage that.
Now, when you're out with your customers, your partners, your clients, not out and about, but when you're working with them these days and weeks, what are the things you're hearing? How are employers and building managers, real estate, what are they thinking about when they go, we need to get people back into the workplace?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think we probably need to start with just kind of what has changed, really, right, in the last three months or so. And of course, that depends a bit upon where you are in the world. But I think there's been a couple key things. Obviously, the health and safety of employees and really what it means to be a healthy building has become front and center, right? How do our workplaces, how do we really support not only the productivity of our workforce, key elements around collaboration, but how do they actually support our employees' health and wellness? And so I think we've seen that take kind of a fundamental, you know, what was always important, and I don't want to discredit a lot of the importance that's had, but I think we've really seen that come into the spotlight in what will hopefully be a really meaningful way going forward as well. So that's, I think, obviously the first obvious point. And we can talk more about what strategies we're seeing implemented as part of that. I think the second is kind of around this notion of the workplace, as I was talking about, excuse me, in the fact that, you know, I'll be honest, in the first couple of weeks at Comfy, we were thinking about, you know, what really is the role of a workplace app in the first 2 weeks when everybody shifted to home. And I think what's very true and what we've been really excited to see is that the role of the workplace, or sort of the notion of it, really expands beyond the four walls of the office. And so thinking about this transition from, you know, in the workplace to in the home, how are we thinking about the actual user experience, if you will, of the workplace now that it's outside the four walls? And what are our employees actually feeling and sort of thinking about, and how do we still connect them with resources and what it means to be an employee of a certain company? And I think in order to... Oh, yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry. Please, Kevin. No, interrupt, please.
Well, you know, I got back into our... it's a small co-working space here, but what I've seen is, okay, there's new signs, there's things on the floor everywhere. You have to go one way down a corridor. Walking into a meeting room isn't that easy anymore. You have to book it in advance, and then the cleaner has to come in, and it's like, it's a lot more complicated, and dealing with the resources within, just say within the building. I'm assuming this is what's going on everywhere in the world right now.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think some of that is just the embodiment of just brand new programs and policies we're seeing clients institute. And because a lot of this is, you know, again, putting health and safety of employees at the forefront of decision making naturally means that so long as, we're without a vaccine or people are still at risk, we naturally will have to change the way that people are returning to work and really operating within that. And so certainly we're seeing kind of one directional walkways to really mitigate, collisions within it or overcrowding in certain spaces. We're seeing capacities of specific space types or rooms be dropped. And most importantly, I think what we've seen across the board is really the overall utilization or sort of density of spaces being dropped significantly lower than what, even 4 months ago at kind of the start of 2020, we were seeing clients really strive for, 85% utilization. And now we're really seeing kind of max at 30%. So if you just think about from a numbers alone, what that means for how our spaces are being used and really how, again, people are navigating through space, it's really significant changes that helping employees navigate that is going to be critical.
And I suppose to bring it back to a kind of what people are seeing is, does that mean that, okay, only 30% of my usual staff can come into the building at any one time, and then you can come in on Tuesday, and Kev, you come in Wednesday, and somebody else? Is that all what it actually turns out to be?
Yeah. And I think what we're seeing is for each organization, for each team, for each type of work, that best sort of result might be different, right? So in some cases, it is a schedule based, right? Where we say we're going to take a certain element of employees that are deemed, sort of essential. And so this is where I think it's partly what employees can be doing from work home still, and let's encourage them to do so. And then I think when we think, okay, now there's a certain segment of employees that do need to be coming back to ensure safety, we'll likely do that only a few days a week or on a scheduled basis or hours of the day. And this is where, again, a lot of clients are sort of struggling to say, what's really that best solution? And what's also adding complexity to this is if you think about a global portfolio, there's many, site level or location specific kind of governance or compliance that needs to be followed, where they're taking kind of government issue first. And so there's all these sort of moving pieces that need to inform an ultimate strategy. And so you can imagine both from the corporate side, how do they effectively manage that and ideally have data to support that, but two, from an employee, how do I know when it's my day to come into the office, and how do I feel about that as well?
True. Because you mentioned at the start, it's all, how do I feel safe in the environment? And that's not necessarily that I'm walking out the corridor, I'm not going to bump into somebody, but when I go into a meeting room or a shared space or a hot desk, was it cleaned before I turned up?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I think just as we, I had to run some errands this weekend to kind of restock my fridge and take care of a couple things. And I think just as I take considerations for my safety as I do that, I need to sort of have the same awareness. And I think we should always assume our employees do have that same awareness, if not even heightened, coming into the workplace. And so how do we just make sure that we're building not just physical safety, but also psychological safety to make sure our employees feel, confident returning to the office. And all these programs and policies help support that as well.
Okay. Now you see me looking off to the side here from time to time because the questions are starting to fly in.
Oh, great.
And so you mentioned, right, Comfy is a technology platform company. Mm-hmm. How does technology play into, okay, I'm going back into work. I'm going to have a conference call or a webinar, and I need to book a room, and I need to know when I'm coming in, and I need to know the place is clean, and what's under the covers?
Yeah. So, I mean, we can talk about Comfy specifically, and of course, I'd love to do that. But I think if I take a step back just about technology in general, I think to talk about an overnight migration almost to work from home, obviously that couldn't have happened successfully without a couple key enabling technologies. And so again, when we think about how technology will serve us going forward, it really has to serve, I think, both in the workplace, but also at home. And so, some of the ways that at Comfy we've been helping clients sort of navigate that is I would kind of bucket it into a couple categories. The first is communicating with employees. So as I mentioned, a lot of this information is changing, at least on a weekly basis. What's sort of the new recommendations of my company, of my sort of local governance or whatever that might be. And so access to just the most relevant information and centralizing that is the first thing that we're seeing, clients, try to help their employees understand. The second is, so now if I know it's my day to come into the office, is I think that navigation. And so once I'm in the office, how do I understand my building entry time? How do I make sure I have a reserved desk to know that when I do come into the office, my space is reserved. I'll have that throughout the entire day to make sure that there's no kind of multi-use of the same space without deep cleaning in between. We can help people kind of find those navigation paths. So obviously, again, how we actually are physically moving throughout the space will be different. And I think a lot of what we're trying to mitigate, which is overcrowding, which sometimes can happen if you think about, a cafe space or, again, elevator lobbies. How do we continue to educate folks around recommendations to say, here's a new amenity space around PP&E pickup, but it's only going to be open during this time, or we actually want you to sort of designate a specific time for you to come to prevent, some of that overcrowding that we don't want to have happen.
Okay, now people that know me, I'm a technology kind of guy. What kind of technology in any building are we talking? Sensors? How would I know that don't go to the canteen now, it's too busy?
Yep. Yes, I think is the answer. So I think right now as an industry, we're looking at how we can get as much data to really, again, support kind of decision makers on the real estate, environmental health and safety, IT teams, because in many cases, some of this data is readily available, right? Whether it be from occupancy sensors, whether it be from Wi-Fi based systems. And right now it's about how do we actually aggregate that data out of buildings or make it really easy for clients to actually implement or install that technology to pull that data from to help them manage this. Because the great news is that this technology has been available for a while and it can serve these new use cases, again, whether it be from occupancy monitoring to contact tracing. And so we're seeing a strong demand from our client base for occupancy or IoT sensors, for Wi-Fi analytics to, again, understand relative densities across a floor plan, and fueling all of that into analytics platforms that help clients understand the effectiveness of certain policies, right? So can I move from 20% of my employee base coming in to 30% in a safe manner? We need those feedback loops and data to help make those decisions over the next probably 12 months at least.
Okay, because this ties into kind of two questions that I see here in the feed. Helmut has asked, so as a building manager or in the HR department, can I use all this for compliance? How can I prove that I didn't have over occupancy and?
Yeah, I think what we're seeing, many of Comfy's partners and through some of our own analytics, we can actually do both real-time and kind of trend analysis to show the actual occupancy information. And so through data analytics, we can actually show, here was a new policy that we put in. Here's how the data looked before and after. Because what we find is many of our clients might be actually changing the actual physical design or closing down certain desks that don't comply with physical distancing practices. And so a lot of that information can be used to then report on both the effectiveness of those policies, but what we're actually seeing in true trend densities or occupancy rates.
Okay, and obviously all that can be generated into compliance reports for the insurance company or the state or local government when they come asking for compliance data.
Yeah, I think that it would be that would be a relative use case. Yeah, absolutely. That the data would be able to be pulled out of analytics and again to view trend over time.
And Paul Hopcroft had asked about how do you start increasing the utilization if you start at 30%? But to your point, if I'm getting all the data and I can, this is our policy for the next 2 weeks, and I can then do trend analysis and I can figure out that there's a choke point over here, but there's not there. So I can get 40% in and we'll still have the safe environment.
Yeah. Well, and I think this is where sort of the behavioral side, which is a personal interest to me, becomes really important where, again, the connection back to the employee to both make them aware of new policies so that we don't see overcrowding, right? A 6-person conference room can no longer safely seat 6 people, and we need to limit those capacities, without effectively bringing the employee into that decision making and ideally, influencing their behavior. We're able to potentially sort of, again, more actively and proactively manage how the space is being used. So, again, many clients we've heard everything from initially only 10% of space will be brought in or sort of up to that 10% density threshold, upwards of maybe 30% towards the end of this year and 50% in 2021. So if we just think about the time scale of that escalation, we'll see, again, what we know is clients are going to be actively looking at data to help inform those decisions. And maybe I can actually reach that 30% number just by reconfiguring space or helping my employees understand that the 4th floor is of a lower density than the 3rd floor. And so encouraging them to go seek spaces there. And so that's where, again, we see a tight connection between how we're using data to inform employee behavior, but also help real estate managers or workplace managers make these key decisions.
Okay. Now, back to let's say the employee safety. How is all this communicated to me, or is that dependent on the company? Some, I don't know, email, WhatsApp, some messaging, something?
Yeah. In many cases, we're seeing all of the above, right? Where, I think it's not uncommon right now that folks are getting, weekly emails about here's the latest. In many cases, again, things might be changing on a quite regular basis. And so, what we've been doing, again, from the company perspective is trying to centralize all of that, but also allow enough flexibility such that if, I'm sitting here in San Francisco. We have one client with a couple of buildings downtown here, and the reopening strategy they have for each of those buildings, even in the same city, is different. And so how do they make sure that they're kind of communicating effectively just the incredible nuance of that so that employees aren't coming into the office when they shouldn't be, which is, putting anyone at risk. So I think what we find is that being able to communicate, and obviously company's belief is meeting employees where they are, right? Which is, I don't go anywhere without my mobile device. I'm reliant on that for so much else in my life. So we find that kind of centralizing information there and really promoting what all the practices that are being put in place not only just drives awareness, but it also builds trust, which I think is really key right now as well.
Now, you mentioned that obviously, as you say, like one client, 3 different buildings, 3 different strategies, for want of a better word, because the buildings are different and the occupancy and the flow and. But obviously, they can revisit a lot of their data, as you say, after a couple of weeks and see what's happening. But chatting with your team during the week, an awful lot of this data comes in real time as well. So if I'm an employee and I book a meeting room and I go to the meeting room and for whatever reason I don't feel comfortable or whatever, and it's back to building up the trust you mentioned earlier. Yep. I can message straight away and say, what's the status on this? Can this, I can report things in real time.
Yeah. Absolutely. And I think that this element of feedback, so I was talking earlier about, how do we use data to inform employees, which is critical to, again, I think influencing that behavior we want to see, but also building trust and confidence to say, here's all the new resources we're making available to you, mask pickups or hand sanitation stations, all those things. That's really kind of from the corporation to the employee. But I think it's critical right now that we also be focusing on the other direction, right? Which is getting as much feedback from employees back into building operations or workplace operations to, again, know the effectiveness, where we might be investing an incredible amount in resources that aren't really moving the needle in terms of employee sentiment or employee confidence. And that doesn't mean necessarily that those aren't required. Maybe that's a compliance issue, but I just think it's imperative now more than ever that we're getting rapid and real-time feedback from employees, both in how they're experiencing the space, but in resources that they need, right? Maybe that mask pickup spot is running low on masks, right? How do we very quickly get feedback back to workplace managers to iterate on what we will inevitably have to be iterating on?
So restock the masks at this level. The gel is running out and whatever.
Yeah, because spaces need to be cleaned, right? I think as we put more focus on the actual cleaning schedules, cleaning requirements, there's a lot of ways for employees to be submitting feedback. Again, even just about how they're experiencing, right? You came into the office today, how did you feel, right? What was, from something as simple as what you see at the airports of sort of the red face,
the smiley face,
kind of the smiley faces, right? I mean, I think there's lots of ways just to get that and to influence, the policies, the programs, again, whether we should kind of increase densities or whether we should reconfigure spaces, whether we should make greater investments in PP&E or other, quote unquote, amenity style spaces or health and safety resources.
Okay. Now there's a couple of questions popping up here from Paul and a few others in terms of, is it correct to say that this is the technology and the platform that you've had for, let's say, a while in terms of, and it's probably a different use case, because before, as you said, it was about how do I get above the 85% occupancy or use of the building. So now it's just simply same technology, complete different set of critical criteria. My guess is, but you tell me, my guess is that employees are far more far more interested in the cleanliness of their building than they were 2 months ago or 3 months ago.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think you're right. And so maybe I'll answer this question first from a technology perspective, because I think the good news, and when I say good, I mean it allows us to move quickly, right, is the fact that, many, if not all of these enabling technologies were already on the market, right? IoT sensors, more IT-based tools that can fuel into this, technology like Comfy. And it's really the fact that we're serving just new use cases with the same approach, the same technology, allows us to very quickly, again, respond to this market need, right? Which I think is great, because again, everything has happened so quickly. And so many of our clients are like, I love what you can do in 6 months, but what can you do for me today?
What can I do now?
Exactly. And so that's been critically important, and that's great. And now I think we will improve technology, right? I think, again, contact tracing is a good example of technology that maybe we probably weren't thinking about necessarily a couple months ago, but will be increasingly important in how we kind of help organizations manage that. But most of which, again, the technology was already there. And I think to your point around what does that mean from employee opinion, right? I mean, I think there's new care abouts, if you will. As I mentioned, I think personally, I've always cared about sort of the wellness of my building or sort of the health, but never to this degree, right? And so I think we'll start to see sort of just sentiment or opinions continue to shift over the coming months. And that's why that feedback is so critical.
Okay. And I'm guessing as well, you mentioned earlier, and I've seen this with a lot of other things around, let's say, smart building, smart city, smart whatever, was that people were saying the data was there, but it was in different systems. And in the past 3 months, people have suddenly started to figure, we got to start using the data we have. So what do you call it? Digital transformation, or the integration of this stuff seems to just have got a lot more rapid in the past 3 months to be able to use the data, because suddenly they go, well, we have some data, we can use it, we better use it.
Yeah. And I think this is where, as I mentioned, the benefit is that the technology was there, which allows us to deploy quickly, but there's new use cases, which, I think part of the sort of title of this was thinking beyond just reentry. And why that's really critical is the fact that investments made today for these very near-term use cases really can serve a longer-term strategy for workplaces, for real estate and portfolio management. And so while we understand there's the utmost focus on the near-term use cases, we're really encouraging clients, even if it's incremental benefits that can be made, right? Because we also know, capital budgets right now are also tight. And so how do you just make sure that you're taking a step back, thinking a bit beyond just reentry, because the great news is that investments you make today for kind of the near-term focus of a healthy and safe return to workplace can also serve your go-forward strategy. And so I think that's where we really are trying to encourage folks to think about it at this foundational level, and not just sort of the near-term, I'm thinking of funny examples. Sort of people, just putting tape over desks and things like that. That there can also serve a longer term vision to some of the technology that's being deployed.
And what I found interesting was you have the playbook in terms of which has been playing out for probably the 3 months. There was the crisis management up front in terms of, oh my God, and now it's planning for the workplace reentry. But what I found interesting was the whole concept of, to be quite honest, to get employees back into the workplace and feel safe is all about business continuity. And it's about keeping the wheels turning of a business, of an organization. So as you say, it's not about just how many people in that meeting room, but how do I then use that to, what do you call it? What business practices do we need to change, and what's our business continuity plan for the next probably 24 months?
Absolutely. And I think this is where, since we've kind of all pulled our heads up from sort of that crisis management, I think, in the last probably 3 weeks or so, we've just seen a tremendous amount of news on this, right? Where you see, companies like Twitter or Facebook say, we're going to move to work from home, right? Or that'll be an option for employees, forever going forward. And so I think it's fundamentally making us think about what is the role of the workplace and how does that drive business goals in the long term? And so I don't think the dust has settled. I think there's probably a lot more that we need to learn about how employees want to work in the workplace, trade-offs that we always hear, between commute times versus, what do I need to be coming into the office for in terms of face-to-face collaboration with people or with my colleagues. So I do think we're going to start to, again, that I don't think that the jury's still out is maybe the best way to say. And again, I think it'll be different for different organizations, for different teams and how they work best. And even, geographies, I think will also play in to account as well when we think about very costly real estate markets where they might be looking to sort of decrease their portfolio size or office space. I think all these factors, when we think about that business continuity stage, are going to start to play into account.
And we've just had a comment in from Fahad in terms of, it's not just all about the technology, it's about people's behavior. My guess is that as you go around the world, the culture is different as well. Now, obviously, the regulations are different. We see here in Europe, even the phases of coming out of lockdown are slightly different from France to Spain to the UK to whatever. And that has implications for businesses. So you mentioned the case of a company in San Francisco with 3 buildings. My guess is big multinationals will have buildings all over the world, and it'll be totally different in all of them. And yet the culture will have to change.
Absolutely. And I think it's, it's just inherent complexity everywhere you look, right? Because if I'm, a portfolio manager having to manage just all of this disaggregated complexity, how do I kind of empower local teams such that they can sort of be making sure that they're in compliance with local regulations, all these different things. But then how do I think about to where I think the genesis of the question is, which is to say, employees in all of these spaces think differently about, workplace collaboration and about top-down management and about cultural norms. And so again, I think there's not going to be sort of one size fits all. And so again, I think we're just kind of encouraging clients again to sort of take a step back and think about whether it be technology or whether it be programs, that you're allowing that sort of flexibility to account for this local complexity, but kind of corporate response as well. Kevin, I'm going to lower my shade really quickly. On the San Francisco sun is normally not this bright this early, so apologies, but I'm going to go ahead and do that so that I can see you more clearly.
Yeah, no, you were getting blinded there. Okay. Now, obviously, this webinar and our LinkedIn Live here, this is the first of a whole series that you have this week on Beyond Workplace Reentry. Tomorrow, there's a session on building a culture of trust in the COVID era. Thursday, you have creating a more resilient workplace through digital transformation, and you're finishing up on Friday with balancing safety, privacy, and technology, a CEO's perspective, one of your colleagues from Siemens. If I may, in the real world where you're working with your clients today, what has changed? My guess is, and I'm not from that world, I'm the energy side of the house. Yeah. My guess is that large corporations, real estate owners, they will have had building managers. They'll have had some sort of management software. They'll have some sensors. They'll have whatever. What have you seen different? And have they suddenly got far busier? Have they taken on completely new, I don't know, crisis management team? What's been happening in the real world?
Yeah, well, I think one, maybe just a precursor is just the teams that have come together, right, to solve this. Okay. And I think it really, it's not counter to trends that we've been seeing, which is to say, facility management, working with real estate, working with IT. We've been seeing that trend, over the last couple of years, but I think this has really accelerated a lot because, again, this has sort of been an all hands on deck. And so, the role of IT and environmental health and safety, again, even risk and compliance teams getting involved, I think that's been really interesting where we're working with stakeholders within our client organizations that we previously weren't, which I think is really sort of the signal to say, we're breaking down silos within organizations to help solve some of these problems or just the scenarios that we're in. I think to speak specifically to your question around kind of what does this mean for building management, obviously, again, when we think about building systems like HVAC, we've seen, a huge spike in interest or sort of, how are we thinking about ventilation rates? How are we thinking about outdoor air coming in? And really some of the trade-offs that have historically where we've said, let's drive as much energy efficiency as we can. I think what's great is there's many technologies that allow us to sort of deliver on both energy efficiency and some of these new, air filtration, maximizing outdoor air. But I think we're thinking about those trade-offs in new ways because, again, health and safety is such a key focus. And so I participated in a CoreNet hackathon a couple weeks ago, and our team had some really great insight around sort of virus resiliency, right? And I think HVAC specifically will be kind of a big factor when we think about whether it be a tenant inquiring with their landlord about, how do they operate in a resilient or sort of thinking about new considerations for HVAC when it comes to virus and sort of, again, health and safety.
What was quite interesting here in Europe and in the US and around the world over the past maybe 5-10 years, we've been talking about building efficiency, and there was the LEED standards and over the years it was a slow burn, but after a while there were certain clients looking for a better level of energy efficient building. So the better you were, the more competitive advantage you had. Absolutely. My guess is that if you're a real estate manager and you can demonstrate to your clients that you've got a better handle on what's going on within your building in real time, we can scenario plan, we can modify, we can be compliant. My guess is that's a competitive advantage for real estate going forward.
Absolutely. I think just as much as we saw, again, kind of LEED kind of go through a rise where it became in many cases, especially when you're talking about, Class A premium real estate and, again, leading organizations in their own real estate plans, it really became kind of, and is, table stakes, right? To say, if I'm going to go out and build a new headquarters, more than likely it's going to be LEED Platinum or some LEED designation. What we've also seen is obviously the WELL building certification, or Fitwell is another certification, where what we had seen is a lot of companies take interest. Many were going through certification, but a lot were also just adopting those practices and not certifying, right? And so it'll be really interesting, I think, to see, for exactly the reasons that you're talking about, where it's really important from, an external view to say, we are managing this building, or we have built this building with certain established, wellness criteria. I wouldn't be surprised if we see that.
Now, My guess is, and I think it was Fahad brought it up as well, we, myself say as an employee, we'll have to change our own behavior.
Mm-hmm.
And we've seen with the whole lockdowns, there was this nudging, you know, we want you to try and do this, wear a face mask. Here where I live in the south of France, some towns it's compulsory, some it's not. So, but there's kind of I wouldn't say social pressure, but there's kind of do the right thing and show respect for others and wear a face mask. My guess is that you want to try and, our companies, real estate, everybody will try and help people change their behavior. You don't need 10 people in the meeting room. You can have 4 in the meeting room and the rest are dialing in from home. Is this something that you're helping customers with as well, in terms of, here's the best practices from one client, try some of the best practices over here?
Yeah. So I think definitely kind of best practice sharing and what are we seeing kind of across our client base, even what are we seeing in countries that have come back earlier than others? How can we sort of take lessons learned and apply those
what worked
in other spaces? You know, I think, you know, and this is where I'll speak a bit from my own personal, you know, I'm an optimist. I like to believe that folks, when given the right information, when given the right resources, which is key, will do what's best, right, for themselves, but also for their community, whether that be their colleagues, whether that be, you know, whatever it might be. And so again, what we're really focusing on is make sure everyone has the visibility they need to on the new practices, right, on the new policies, which, you know, again, most of what we're seeing our clients do is, of course, it's, you know, the bare minimum is what is legally required within a certain area, you know, state or, you know, country, state or city. And then some corporations are going above and saying, yep, we want to be wearing masks in our offices to ensure space, or here is our you must be washing your hands every 30 minutes or whatever it may be.
Yeah.
So I think one is just educating, right? Where if I understand that, my likelihood to comply is probably going to go up, but then I also need to have the resources, right? So if I forgot my mask today, can my employer supply me one to make sure that I'm still in compliance and things like that. So I might be a bit of an optimist, but I do think that sort of meeting both of those. And then again, if I don't want to, how am I giving my feedback back to say, you know, I'm still uncomfortable coming into work because public transit, right? Or whatever that is, because a lot of things
in the subway or the bus or whatever.
Right? There's also, you know, I think we've seen that need for heightened communication between employers and management to really understand where some of this uneasiness or some of those behavior, if I'm pushing back from a behavior, why is that, right?
Now, in I suppose personal experience and years in corporate land, normally you'd have your company and you have the corporate culture and you have HR and whatever. And many times you're renting the building, and the guy who runs the building and manages the building and owns the building, they're a third party. My guess is in this new world, these things are coming back together, because if I'm an employee and I'm not happy with my workplace and I go complain to my manager and it goes up the food chain, but that connection has to be back to the actual people who run the building. And my guess, there's a lot of contracts and. So there must be a renewed, I don't know, joining the dots between all these functions. Yeah,
and again, I think, you know, in the longer term, if I kind of zoom out maybe, you know, 18 months or something like that, I think let me sort of explain here before I jump in time in my head, is the fact that, you know, if we think that more and more of our workforce is going to be working from home, presumably, potentially, the need for space might go down. If I'm a corporate organization, the easiest place for me to offload will be leases. So even if I just take a pure fiscally minded response, it's going to be very much in landlords' interest to make sure that they're, you know, again, understanding the value that they're emphasizing, their practices that they're putting in place to ensure the health and safety of tenants, or providing data back for them to understand how spaces are being used. So I do think this connection point that you're talking about, and making sure that there's alignment between a tenant and really what the tenant is putting in place for the health and safety or outcomes for their employees and for their business, is being tied back to how the landlord is running. And from everything I've heard, you know, I think a lot of that is happening. I think anybody, you know, probably the degrees by which developers and kind of landlords are doing that will likely determine success, I'd imagine, maybe, again, 2 years from now.
Yeah, it's as you say, and like it's called out in your playbook, there was the initial piece of crisis management. Oh, what do we do now?
Right.
Then it was planning for when the lockdown starts easing off and getting people back into the offices and whatever low occupancy and. But the business continuity was, unfortunately, this doesn't seem to be going away next week. So we got a plan.
Absolutely. And again, I think right now, plans that promote flexibility for all of the change that will likely happen in the next 9, 12 months, I think kind of pre-vaccine, if that's sort of the mile marker you want to use. I think those will, again, afford probably, the most upside potentially when we think, because I think things will inevitably change, right, over that time horizon.
And there's a couple of questions here from Paul and a few others flying up and thing. If I was in real estate, or I was a building owner or building management or a company or whatever, and I've invested in a lot of the sensors and technologies, and it's in the building, it's let's say a smart building or smart-ish, then obviously I can start using that data. What do you say to people that, let's say they're not it's not a very smart building, there's not a lot of sensors? Can they also do something how can you help them, or is it a complete retrofit before they get off the ground?
Yeah, and I think that there's, the good news is that there's a spectrum, right? So a lot of what we're talking about, you don't need to have, a marquee smart building to be able to implement.
Super duper, super, whatever. Yeah.
Right. And so what we're kind of hearing from customers, again, is this is where the beauty of technology that's available now can kind of support this wherever you are along this spectrum, right? So maybe I don't have IoT hardware everywhere. We'll first kind of try to understand what data we can pull from any systems, whether those be building automation systems, whether it be lighting control systems, where, to your earlier point, this data was historically just siloed and not easily accessible. So that's one of the first questions we ask. The second is now there's lots of great ways to pull data from IT infrastructure. So using things like Wi-Fi analytics, we can really quickly get a survey across a portfolio to know where deeper investment in additional hardware is actually best served. And so that really allows sort of this like iterative, incremental investment strategy that I think, again, will just be really important for clients, especially in a world where budgets are likely going to be tight for the foreseeable future. So how do you make sure each dollar you're investing is really, where it should be, in what technology it should be, and that it's serving kind of as many use cases as possible.
But I suppose because being able to take the real-time data, show people, look, this is what's actually happening. If we want to increase the efficiency of the building and bring more people in, then you can show people data that, look, it's still safe, because they want to, hang on a second, if there's 20 more people around, what's that going to do? Right?
Yeah, exactly. And I think it's not only that we can bring 20 more people back, but how we bring them back is equally, one of the things that I think is also interesting in the multi-tenant environment, or again, in probably more urban environments, is both entries and elevator lobbies, right? I mean, how are we going to safely bring back, each of those new increments of people? How am I going to bring back 15 stories of a building if I can only have 2 people in an elevator at a time? These are all things that are influencing technology, but again, I would say more so strategies of how we effectively bring people back in a safe manner.
No, I agree. The technology is a piece of the puzzle, but it, as you say, we've all seen large cities around the world where at 9 o'clock or 8 o'clock in the morning, there's 5,000 people
exactly
going in within 10 minutes.
Right.
And we were used to it, right? It was just the way it was.
Right.
Probably grab a coffee on the way and run up the stairs. Right?
Right.
And, but I know when we were chatting last week, one of the big concerns with one of the key things is maintaining that trust with employees, that, as you said, it's about communicating what's going on today. this is how we're making it safe. If you don't feel safe, you can report in real time. And as it evolves over that, because that's, you know, I think this is going to evolve, as you say, for months and many months. So it's just about maintaining that trust.
I think that that'll be key. You know, again, I think especially when we look at what will determine, again, you know, the future workplace, right? You know, what is that really going to take shape from? I think a lot of it is going to stem from, you know, habits that are built in these next couple months, right? And you could argue many already have been established. But I think, to me, you know, the greater trust and confidence we can build with employees, and I think it was Gallup did a great survey that was released last week or the week before around, you know, what % of people are comfortable going back today, and you know, well over half, I think it was 60-some% of folks said, like, I'm not really comfortable going back to the workplace. And so I think what we fundamentally believe, right, the workplace is still a thing, right? If you look at what connection, as much as my productivity maybe has been maintained, my connection with my coworkers has been impacted. And so the workplace will forever be a thing. So how do we, you know, build this trust and confidence to bring people back, to drive connection, to drive collaboration, things that just in a work from home environment we can't probably do as effectively. And so, you know, I'm just a firm believer, and I think we've seen this even pre-COVID, where visibility is such a key part of that, where if I really understand and have visibility into all the things my employer or my landlord is doing to make my safe space, that the resources I have available to me, I think we'll see that start to impact this notion of trust. And then I think once we are able to kind of come back and you know, reinvigorate that connection and that I think we're all craving right now, it'll kind of also help.
Okay. And again, I go back to my techie world. So as a comfy user, if I'm the building manager or real estate, my guess is I have some dashboard or something that I can see whatever's going on in real time.
Exactly.
That's what you deliver, right? The platform.
Yeah, exactly. So our platform serves two primary applications. The mobile application, which is in the hands of the employees, which we sort of talked a lot about.
The Comfy app
helps, exactly. The Comfy app helps people, you know, find and book spaces, understand, again, what resources are available to them, navigate throughout the space. But we use all the data that's generated through the application, along with the systems we're integrating into, IoT systems, IT systems, OT operational systems, into our analytics dashboard that we call Comfy Insights. And so that's kind of the one-stop shop for real estate or building operators to understand how spaces are being used, so that utilization, feedback from people. So again, more on the sentiment and work requests, and all of that gets centralized in Comfy Insights.
Okay. Because that's how it joins back together. Okay.
Exactly. Yep.
Now, for the rest of the week, we're coming up on 10 minutes before the hour, so we'll be finishing up pretty soon. But as I said, this is the first of a whole series. You had a series. Tomorrow, it's building a culture of trust within the COVID era workplace. And you have a bunch of clients that are chatting with you tomorrow, right?
We do. So it's actually many of kind of our partners that we work with in the market. So Comfy has been, able to work with some of the leading organizations from workplace strategy, workplace consulting, and really just tremendous thought leaders. And so we, and I feel very lucky that I get to moderate this, because it's people I both admire in the market and that I think are doing great work. So we're going to be bringing together folks throughout the rest of this week in our two webinars that you mentioned, both tomorrow morning and Thursday morning, to really come and talk about the topics of building employee trust and resiliency through digital transformation. And so those are folks from companies like Gensler, Deloitte, HOK, Siemens, Leaseman, and I'm forgetting some, so please make sure you go on our website to see more. So it should be really great, where again, we're just trying to bring together different perspectives that can hopefully be helpful as many of our clients are navigating this space, and again, trying to think beyond just re-entry.
And all the details they're on at 8 a.m. Pacific time, 5 p.m. Central European time, Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday.
Correct. Yep. You got it.
And there's anybody who's been watching on the LinkedIn Live, there's links everywhere there to go and see all the rest of the webinars. And if folks want to get access to your playbook, I believe it's simply go to the Comfy website.
Exactly. Yep. So we have, as Kevin was sort of speaking to, we put out about a month or so ago, and we've been updating it with new content on a regular basis, sort of our return to workplace playbook, which again really sort of walks these three phases that we see, from crisis management to workplace reentry to business continuity. What are some of the struggles we're hearing, and really how clients are thinking about not just technology, but again, kind of some of these workplace strategies to support those three phases.
Ah, okay. Right, I'm checking here. I think we've got through most of the questions. I had all my notes here, and I think we've hit off everything
we did. We talked
I
about
wanted
a
to
lot.
find out about.
Okay.
Any last comments, questions, or how would you say, words of wisdom from yourself before we finish up?
You know, I think, and that's a lot of words of wisdom, Kevin. No. I think, you know, for me, it's again, what we're just hearing time and again is there are some very near-term needs, and we fully recognize that. And Comfy's been really excited with some of our readily available products and services to help clients implement that. But I would just really encourage folks to think a bit beyond about how they're laying the foundation for future use cases and really the future strategy of their portfolio. Because again, I think there's a wealth of available services and technologies that can be deployed today that can meet kind of on both those time scales. And so we just keep encouraging clients to sort of think holistically, even if it takes you kind of an iterative investment cycle to get that, or to get there, excuse me. So I think that's really kind of our message this week, and what we've seen be really compelling in helping clients.
Okay. And I'm going to put you on the spot now. What was the most interesting or strategy, use case, technology deployment that you've seen in the past 2 or 3 weeks with one of your clients, or a couple of months, and did you went like, oh wow, never thought of that?
Yeah, you know, I think, well, I think we've heard kind of some funny stories about some, and again, I understand this is a spectrum, right, of folks that based upon their level of investment. So we've seen some kind of funny ones that folks are doing, which I think, again, it's just the immediacy, right? When you need something to deploy really quickly,
you gotta get it done.
Right? Masking tape becomes a really compelling solution. And so we understand that maybe as sort of V1 of what clients are doing. So that's where we've seen some innovative things, I would really say. But I think what we've also seen that I think is important is the ability of clients say, I need to deploy something, but it's actually the opportunity for them to consolidate previous investments, right? So I think another thing that's important is they don't need to deprecate or sort of previous investments that they've made, whether those be through, and again, I'll just speak to Comfy, you know, other mobile applications or other feature sets that engage their employees, that they can kind of onboard those. And I think that that's been important because, again, as we look forward, it's not about sort of forgetting the past or previous investments. It's really about sort of combining those to drive these outcomes. And so I think that's been really interesting, where you see the wheels of clients kind of start to turn in new ways when they think about consolidating investments in the name of user experience and employee health and safety.
Well, I think it was the CEO of Microsoft said that in the past 2 months, he's seen more digital transformation than in 2 years.
Right.
Simply because, and it's not that people have been installing brand new everything. It's simply, okay, we have all of these systems, but we never joined the dots.
Right.
So now it's join the dots.
Exactly.
Call it integration, call it whatever. But it's as you say, it's budgets will be tight, so it's make the best use of what you have, right? Mm-hmm. So hey,
absolutely.
No, it is a fascinating topic, and it is, you know, I think a lot of the questions and the comments coming in on LinkedIn Live, it's something that affects us all. You know, we often talk about a technology and an app and a way of doing things, but it's like, yeah, it's not really relevant to me every day. This is relevant to all of us every day for the foreseeable future.
Right, absolutely. And again, that's where, to me, I think I take a lot of personal pride just in the fact of thinking first as a user myself, right? And to say, what is the experience? Where are some of my, anxiety, and how do we just kind of help limit that or minimize that or do whatever we can, as big or as small to sort of help that experience, because we're all, as employees, as people, in uncharted territory. So how do we kind of lead with that user first, empathy based approach to sort of help employees navigate a new world, really?
Yeah, it is a new world.
It is.
New normal.
Exactly.
Come here, Erica. Thank you so much for our chat this morning. Just before we sign off, a bit of housekeeping for everyone. There are a couple of questions I think we didn't get to. We'll follow up with those afterwards, because this LinkedIn Live will stay there as a post, and people can come back and watch it on demand. We'll also be posting it up to YouTube. And obviously, you have wish you luck with the webinars for the rest of the week. And hey, it is a fascinating topic, because it's the intersection of technology with something that touches every one of us.
Absolutely. And so, Kevin, thank you so much for your time. This has been a really fun hour and a great way to start my Monday. So yeah, I encourage everybody, if you're interested in the topics that we talked about, 8 a.m. Pacific this week, and we look forward to carrying on the conversation. But Kevin, thank you again so much for your time too.
Hey, thanks a lot. I enjoyed it.
Great.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.